Hello and welcome. I am Chakshu Roy and you're watching Laws in the Making. Today we are discussing the Cinematograph Amendment Bill 2019. With the advent of digital technology, issues like piracy, copyright violations have arisen and caused losses to the film industry. The bill prohibits and penalizes people from using a recording device to make a copy of the film without prior permission. To discuss the bill, I have on the show with me Mr. Subhimal Bhattacharjee, cyber policy expert, and Mr. Virag Gupta, advocate, Supreme Court of India. Currently, the film industry faces significant losses due to increase in piracy, which has had an impact on the number of people paying to watch a movie in theatres. The purpose of the bill is to prohibit unauthorized recording in theatre halls by penalizing it.
Cinema has undergone significant transformation with the advancements made in digital technology. However, this has also led to an increase in platforms which host pirated films. The film industry and especially smaller production houses incur great losses due to an increase in piracy.
You see, the government has already been doing. Earlier, the punishment was for 2 years and 50,000 or 50 lakhs fine, actually different. Increasing the provisions, it might be a deterrent, but implementation of this is very difficult. Even in the previous history of pirated cases and all, very few cases of piracy have been settled or have been punished or where the action has been taken. So my suggestion would be to the government, when the law is enacted, that there should be regulating authority, where we can report the piracy of the film straight, instead of going through all the cumbersome procedure of going to the courts, police stations and all, which actually deters people from lodging a complaint.
Currently, there exists the Cinematograph Act 1952, which includes provisions related to the process of providing certification for films. The Act also imposes penalties on offences such as public exhibition of a film that has not been certified or tampering with a film after it has been certified. The bill amends the Cinematograph Act to include penalties for unauthorized recording of films.
The amendment clearly states that any person who, without the written authorization of the Copyright Act of the owner, user takes any recording to make it transmit on the film of the copyright or attempts to do so. So the making of a transmission of such a copy will be liable or such for a punishment.
The Cinematograph Act was enacted in 1952. Since then, the medium of cinema has evolved, so have the ways in which people consume cinema. With growing platforms that host pirated films, it has become easier to watch these films instead of paying to watch the film in a theatre. The Cinematograph Amendment Bill has been introduced with the intent to reduce unauthorized recording and distribution of films. The Cinematograph Act Amendment Bill 2019 was introduced in Rajya Sabha by the Minister of State for Information and Broadcasting, Mr. Rajyavardhan Rathore, on February 12, 2019. The bill has been referred to a standing committee for further recommendations.
Movies in India have a resonance in the society. People watch movies as a form of entertainment, families go together as weekend outings. Subhimal, coming to you. What is the idea of prohibiting piracy? What is the impact does it have on society?
See, what has happened is that whenever anything creative is done, there's a lot of forget the expenditure part, but there's a lot of hard work, there's a lot of intellectual activity that goes on. Now, if that whole effort goes for a toss because somebody is finding a way to easily take it away from you, so you always have to have a mechanism to protect that intellectual capacity as well as the costs and everything. And having worked in this IT industry, or more from the laws and around the digital technology, and primarily the whole impact on the whole you can say the movie industry or the documentary industry, anything, they've all got a fillip ever since digital technology has come in. Most of the theaters are all using digital technology. All of the streaming is based on that. Now, if I tell you, my experience where I myself graduated into producing some of those documentaries primarily. Well, what was my first thought? Because most of my documentaries are very well researched, had to travel across the world to do it, and Then, so when I made my first documentary, which is on the Second World War in Northeast, Memories of a Forgotten War. Now, we had shootings all over the Northeast. We had shootings in UK, Japan, everywhere. And then when we used all the interpreters, I needed 13 interpreters and 11 translators to work on that. So now, at every stage, I used to be worried is somewhere if some leakage happens. Anyway, the complete product when you put it across, and I have done only very controlled shows. I used to feel very hiccups when I used to see a young fellow trying to take a video clip, and because everyone has a device with him today.
These days, correct.
And that is where you feel he doesn't know the value of how much effort I have put, how much money I have put. He will just take it and flash it across and all. So I think a maturity has to happen in the society where we have to understand that we have to value somebody's intellectual effort.
Somebody's work has to be valued.
Yeah.
And Virag, clearly, the Indian Parliament has thought about, protecting the intellectual property of individuals and, creative artists. Because I think the Copyright Act is, an act from the 1950s. The Cinematograph Act is also an act from the, I think for the first parliament of this country. What has been the evolution, if you can, elaborate on that? What has been the evolution for protecting either cinema or copyrighted materials in this country?
No, originally this act was meant for the certification purposes only, and Copyright Act is a detailed act for this purpose, and whatsoever amendment or whatsoever changes are being done in this present act, I personally feel that they have the limited impact, and it shows that there is a lack of interministerial some communication in the government, because many things now the enforcement agencies will have to depend on the Copyright Act provisions, and in the age of new age technology, when the transmission, download, online many activities are being done, so only limited purpose that this illegal recording is being penalized, and for other purposes government or the police or the whosoever is the victim will have to rely on the Copyright Act. So I feel that enforcement will become more difficult, and I see this whole issue from the three perspectives. The first perspective is that these movies, cinema halls and everything comes within the purview of jurisdiction of the state governments, where the police is the enforcing agency. Secondly, judiciary in the age of online and this digital age, how their orders will be enforced. And thirdly, in these provisions, instead of being consolidated at one place, now one will have to see some provisions of the Copyright Act, some provisions of the Cinematograph Act, and many times police may go to the IPC also, because they have the typical tendency to put some clauses of the IPC whenever they want to make any case.
Okay. So, just quickly, if I had to ask you, what is the economic impact of piracy in this country? Because I was reading a report which said that, the movie industry, if you include not only the Bollywood but other, regional movie industries of the country, I think it's a $2 billion.
$2.8 billion according to a study earlier this year. Yeah, absolutely. So, this is a mind-boggling figure in terms of, even if you look at it, it's more than 16,000 crores. Now, as I said earlier, producers put in a lot of money, there is a lot of effort and all, and everyone is losing. The moment something is pirated, it's not only the producer, even the theatre owners and everyone, it's a cumulative loss that has been accumulating. And now, because of, tendencies to use your, small devices and all. Yeah, so
there is a loss to the people who produce the movie. There's a loss to the cinema halls which distribute it.
There's a loss of jobs, and of course, when you are
there's a loss of revenue to the exchequer, because if you're not watching a movie in the hall, then you're not paying tax on that movie. Virag, I had a question for you. How does currently movie piracy get addressed? So how do state governments address it? How does central government address it?
I think that major part of this loss, I think that is related to the international nexus also, wherein Mumbai, Singapore and Dubai, this whole network is there. And if you see the current reports, even beneficiary countries are the Tanzania and other remote countries which we have never heard. So now it's very difficult that somebody is recording from some Bihar cinema hall and circulating it. Now this whole thing is being done in an international level, And this online and digital technology, everything is helping, and I personally feel that this limited perspective of recording in this proposed amendment may not serve the purpose of the film industry as is being required by them.
Okay, but currently, if I had to prevent movie piracy, what is the mechanism that the government or the movie producers or the state governments follow to prevent piracy of a movie? The legal provisions.
Problem is that in India, this piracy is not treated as any crime. We have seen in this when we use the computer network or the operating system or the softwares. So we don't treat it as a crime, and we don't have machinery wherein we can enforce the laws. So that is the biggest challenge. The challenge is not of the law. I think that Copyright Act has the sufficient provisions to deal with such type of situation. But film industry wanted some specific provision in their act, and that's why it has been mentioned. But the problem will be that whenever you want to go enforce this law, so now it says that writer. Now writer has been defined as the producer because it has never been defined as the owner. Now the producer, if it is being recorded in some cinema hall, so cinema hall owner may not have that right to make the complaint. So complaint has to be done by the producer of the film. So these are the tricky issues wherein finally, because ultimately here what they have done, they have make the provision of the high penalty of 10 lakh rupees. So it may work as a deterrent. But finally, I don't think that it will have much impact on this whole business of piracy.
Okay.
The bill prohibits a person from using a recording device to make a copy or transmit a film without written authorization from the producer of the film. By including this provision, the bill aims to reduce the piracy of films and subsequently the distribution of such content on the internet. Increase in pirated films and copyright violations lead to loss of large sums of money.
Piracy is one of the major problem for the Indian film industry particularly, because there are mechanisms by which people can record the things. Now since the DCP cassette has a number of viewing options, so it cannot be played more than that. But after saying that, people can do a recording on the high resolution monitors, people can do the recording inside the cinema hall, people could make illegal DVDs out of it, they can put a torrent on the net, so the people could watch the film without paying for it. So anyone who is found doing this, which is promoting the piracy, should be punishable, and the new proposed act says that it should be either 3 years of imprisonment, up to 3 years of imprisonment, or 10 lakh rupees of a fine, or both. So I think this amount of 3 lakh should be little more, because people make too much of a money, and this 10 lakh and 3 years. 3 years should have at least 6 years of imprisonment, and this 10 lakh should be much more higher, so that people should fear that the moment they are caught, they need to pay 20 lakh rupees or 6 years of imprisonment.
Under the bill, any person found guilty of recording films without the prior authorization of the producers of the film will have to face a penalty. The person will be punished with imprisonment of up to 3 years or fine up to rupees 10 lakh or both.
Number of media houses, websites and all, and the name of the copyright holder should appear even before the film censor certificate is shown. And if this is done, everyone who is watching a film and all will be vigilant about it. Regulator, copyright holder, and to amalgamate this law with the copyright.
The Copyright Act 1957 also includes penalties for a situation in which a copyright work is reproduced or distributed without the permission of the owner of the copyright. Such an infringement will be punishable with imprisonment of up to 3 years and a fine to up to rupees 2 lakh.
The Cinematograph Amendment Bill provides a deterrent as a penalty of up to 10 lakh rupees and punishment up to 3 years. So, Vimal, do you think that the deterrence mechanism provided in the bill is effective enough to either deter completely or at least prevent some part of movie piracy that happens in this country?
I was watching Mr. Naresh Sharma saying about, doubling whatever has been put, more, 10 lakhs and 3 years. I would think, we have to have a mechanism by which we are able to also educate a lot of the people, that piracy ultimately is not going to work, because, I don't know, if really, if this amount or even a higher amount could actually act as a deterrent. It could, somebody has to know. Many people don't know. Many people do it with a criminal intent. So I think definitely a certain degree of deterrence is there, but what is a measure which is optimal, that might be very difficult to say. However, what is more important is how do you implement it, how do you empower your police chaps, what motivates them, to actually pick up such kind of unauthorized viewing or recording, and how do you, redress faster than, dragging something like this and all, because nobody, as Mr. Viraj has mentioned earlier, whatever battles Microsoft and all fight through the Business Software Alliance, but at the end of the day, the propensity to go for pirated software still exists here. So that same mindset works even up here.
Okay. So Viraj, Subimal's pointing out that deterrence can't be the only way of dealing with the problem of piracy. Educating the viewers also could be one of the mechanisms, ensuring effective enforcement mechanisms could be another way to think about it, or possibly creating incentives. For example, I remember, I think recently the GST rate on movie tickets was reduced. So if it is easier or cheaper to go and watch a movie in a hall, probably that will prevent somebody from, doing piracy movies. What do you think?
No, we have to see that in this new age of mall culture, most of the small towns and district places, they don't have movie hall at all. So reducing the GST may not fulfill the desires of the persons who are living in the interiors. Now coming to the proposed amendment and the changes, it only covers the production. Now rest of the areas, whether the transmission, download, publication, streaming, for all these purposes, one will have to go to the Copyright Act, and I personally feel when it matter goes to the police authorities, they will have to invoke the provisions of IT Act also. Now the biggest problem in India is that whenever it comes to the 3-4 acts, it becomes difficult, because before creating awareness among the persons, people, we have to create awareness among the state government and the police authorities, because ultimately they have to understand, now somebody is doing the recording and he is not transmitting it. How you can prove that he is doing the recording and violating the law? We have seen one incident in 2012 in Kerala, where FIR was lodged against thousands of persons for doing something wrong with the movie Bachelor's Party. Now in a movie hall, somebody is doing some recording, everybody has got a smartphone where recording can be done. So unless transmission is not there or some streaming is not there, so for that purposes one has to go to the other acts, and that I think that here we need to again review that why we cannot bring all the provisions at one place.
Okay. Subimal, so you were talking about the IT Act, right? The amount of data that you can now consume for a very little amount of money. There used to be a time that internet charges are very expensive. Now, streaming a movie on your phone or on your laptop is very inexpensive. And you mentioned the fact that there has to be something done in the IT Act. Can you elaborate a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think, the IT Act definitely is applicable here, because, the moment you are transmitting a recording part, yes, of course, someone can record. But one moment you are responsibly or irresponsibly trying to push it across through transmission, and definitely the provisions of the IT Act.
And I think the IT Act also has provisions which prohibit,
unauthorized.
The government can actually blacklist a website and not allow users to access the website where pirated content is uploaded.
So, I think
Viraj, you were saying.
You want to add?
Here we need to see two interesting cases, PUBG matter and the TikTok matter. In both the cases, High Court have passed the order banning them. Even in the Blue Whale matter, many state governments passed the order banning them. But in the federal structure, we have to see that cinema and movie comes within the state government purview. But banning or taking action against the app, mobile or websites or whatsoever may be comes within the purview of the central government. And now the central government is examining how to comply with the High Court order to ban this TikTok. So I think that there is a challenge, law, regulators, enforcement agencies, central state relations and final order. So it may have impact on some individuals' mischief, but organized character of the piracy, I don't think that this change is going to achieve that objective which is desired by the film industry.
So, well, Viraj's bringing in a very interesting aspect, which is the execution or the implementation of this law has to be happening in the cinema halls. The cinema halls exist on the ground in the states and the districts. And then the interest of the state mechanism to actually address piracy. You think that's a gap that needs to be thought about?
Yeah, of course. Where is the priority, or what is the trigger for the state government to really set in motion something like that? Already the policemen are loaded with tens of things, priorities everyone knows, or priorities, misplaced priorities, everything, I don't see that's becoming or going to become a movement that these guys are going to do. However, as I said, I feel that the more and more education, the more and more awareness, everything, some mechanisms have to be worked out where there is a responsibility that is built in. You will reduce, you are not going to stop everything per se, and the disease will continue for some time. Law enforcement typically in this country has been very poor, and particularly the state governments, and now you can see the police forces in what direction they operate and all. I don't see a sea change that is going to happen with these provisions and all. It's good that the attention is there in the country at the highest level. In fact, the Prime Minister himself mentioned it in January while he was in Mumbai, said, while inaugurating that Museum of Indian Films, that this has to be picked up. But how do you go down and how do you do it? That's
and I think the Finance Minister also mentioned the aspect of piracy in his budget speech. Virag, coming to you, the bill prohibits not only recording but also transmission. Right? So I think what the bill is trying to do is cover two aspects of it. The production aspect of it is, as you mentioned, and possibly the transmission aspect of it. My question to you is, does the state governments have the machinery or the mechanisms available to them to address this problem?
No. No. In the age of social media, because we are seeing this challenge for last 6-7 years, now none of the social companies platform, their respective officers are based in India. In the legal terms, they are called the grievance officers. Now, these grievance officers are based in USA or Ireland or Europe or whatsoever. Now, transmission is being done through the social media companies, now, or app or some other companies. Now, whenever you are transmitting it through those social media companies, how can you stop them, or how can you take the action? One more interesting point is, whenever some content is published or posted in the social media companies, so automatically copyright goes to them. So, whatsoever material is available in the social media companies, so copyright is with them, and if you are downloading it, so it means either they have violated the law or you have not violated the law. So, whether you will punish those social media companies also, but being intermediary, they are exempted under section 79 of the IT Act. So, there is a tricky position that you can, yes, control the person who is recording it unlawfully, but transmission, stream and everything, I don't think that state governments have mechanism and that type of jurisdiction to work on this broadcasting network.
Okay. Subrimal, clearly this is not a problem that only exists in India.
Yeah.
I'm sure, there are movie industries which are fairly, well received all across the world. How does movie piracy get addressed in different parts of the world?
I think, nobody's track record is, absolutely 100% correct, but most of the mature societies, if you can think in terms of, being or accepting that we should pay for a service and all, I think those countries have far much more social cohesion and understanding that ultimately somebody will lose somewhere, so we better control. However, the law enforcement are far much more dedicated and sincere and use technology that is not something of yesterday, so they are able to actually push across. The most of the transmission today is happening through the intermediaries, as Virajji has also mentioned. And I would think that everyone is actually going to the intermediary only after it has been transmitted. No one is able to prevent that transmission to happen. Yes, you prevent it, stop it, or you are able to penalize them if they repeatedly continue with this. So, I don't think that zero-day effect will vanish away or has vanished away in even those economies or countries.
Okay, Virag. So clearly, this is a problem that started out, we have recognized the problem, and over the years, some fixes have been tried to be put in. What is it, do you think, needs to be done additionally, in addition to the provisions that are there in the bill?
I think in the new age technology, law and technology are to be merged together. And whenever we are drafting such type of laws where the violation is dependent on the technological platform, so it has to be corroborated with the IT Act also. And the tendency of the police is to use the IPC provisions. So there is a lot of difference between the IPC and IT Act. IPC is of the British days when everything you can do through the danda. Now in the IT Act, you have so many restrictions, and you need to, and you don't have that type of mechanism also to prove the offence. Somebody is recording, and at what time it is recording, whether it was recording was done in that cinema hall or not, how the panchnama will be drawn. So these things, I think that lot of awareness, lot of infrastructure, and lot of state government that type of enforcement is required to for success of this type of changes.
Great. Virag, thank you. Thank you, Subhimal. Thank you, Virag, for joining us on the discussion. It is now time for us to end the show. You can watch our shows on the RSTV page on YouTube. We will be back with a new issue and a new episode. Keep watching Rajya Sabha TV.